We're good. All right, let's bring 2022-23 Campbell County budget session back.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We just jumping right into fairgrounds?
Yep. Next is culture and recreation team, and I think Gary is the fair manager is first to present.
All right. Welcome, Gary.
All right. Thank you for having me here. I want to welcome to the 168th annual fair that we're going to have this year. Full-blown fair. Last year, we were going to do this in two separate sections. We have the fair, and then we have the event center, which is the year-round operations versus the fair, trying to separate things to see exactly how we're doing. Fair is we're anticipating that it's going to probably be even bigger than last year. Last year was the biggest fair we've ever held. Over 38,000 people came through the gates and were participants at the fairgrounds in 4 days, which is putting a little load on that facility. But that's what we're all about doing. So we've our biggest to highlight things this year we've kind of taken we use our carryover used mostly for our capital construction repairs. This year we opted to divide it up between the two, the event center and the fair, because we also have some things that we have to do for the fair itself to get ready for the next fair, which we are in the process of doing right now. So our biggest expense, of course, is always going to be staff. And this year we're doing a lot with, going to be doing more with contract services, which is, express, that type of thing. More like what, if you see the state fair, usually hires 150 to 160 people to run the state fair. We're going to probably have to hire about 10 during the fair, to the 4 days of the fair, actually for the week of the fair. So we'd be ready to go. Like everything else, everything's, expenses are going to be more, but we anticipate that we've covered that. Hopefully our revenues, I think, will be exceed what our expenses are going to be. That's our goal, always been our end game. And I think we've done a pretty good job the last 15, 16 years of trying to do that compared to the fairs in the past. Anybody has any questions on the fair side of it's our whole reason for being and having that. Our next part is the expense, I call it the expense center, I apologize. Event center is the expense.
Isn't it also the revenue center?
Yeah. Run out of talk here. Event center, I'm happy to report is actually coming back on the revenue side, especially on the bookings. Bookings are the rentals of the weekends during the week of the buildings out there. And right now we're actually, believe it or not, we're booking into 24. We've had calls. The events that have been held out here recently have been far bigger than what we anticipated. More people, more revenue. A normal weekend horse show, let's say the 2-day horse show, is normally about $8,000 because that's including the rent of the stalls, that type of thing. Has been running about 10 to 11,000. So, and that's just because there's so many people using the facility now. So we anticipate that the event center is going to be far off better than what we thought, because we're running out of weekends to help hold the events out there. We anticipate that that by the time we get done, that we will have 24 booked probably by the first of the year, by January of 23. So The only weekends that we don't usually book is, Christmas, of course, if it falls on the weekend, that type of thing. But the holiday weekends are booking up. And we're getting shows from all over the West Coast coming here. One, because it's affordable. The facility is affordable for them to come. So we have to question what the Fair Board has to question is whether we are too affordable for our expense. But as long as our expenses remain below the revenues, we're going to hold the line as best we can before we start having to raise rates. Again, staffing is the biggest issue that we've got out there. And that'll be continue on because a facility like that needs to have, 6 to 8 people to be able to keep the facility up. We're doing it with 3 of us. And we'll continue to do that until we get to the point that we're able to afford, more staff. And of course, staffing becomes the biggest, biggest expense that we're going to have along with the buildings. Age of the buildings, of course, is another factor that plays into it because some of the buildings are, the main income producer is Delashment Arena, and it was built in 1962. Hasn't had any major renovations done to it since it was built. So we're keeping it in tip-top shape the best we can with the staff that we have. And it shows because that's why the facility is being booked too, because people like to come there. We have expanded a little bit. We're not just doing horse shows. The last one was a llama show. If you noticed, we were announced all over the television, radio all weekend long that we had llamas here. We finally got that smell out of the building.
I was told they're like giant golden retrievers.
So we are getting more and more requests for that as we go along. So as you know, it's hard to explain some of the stuff that happens out there. But what we've tried to do is we've been successfully trying to get on the proactive side of any of the repairs of the facility. And that's why with this year that we have, we hope we have the opportunity to add that money into the remodeling and fixing of the buildings out there to keep them up. One of our biggest expenses is going to be the dome roof of the arena. It's at its lifespan on the roof itself. So as we go along, we're trying to figure out how to get that done. And of course, infrastructure is a huge deal. Like I say, most infrastructure out there was put in 60 years ago. And so it's continually, but I feel confident, with us, with our staff, that we've been able to attack that, get ahead of it as we go along and keep working on that. But any and all dollars that I can, I put into the capital improvements for the facility. And we're still alive.
Here, I have a few questions. And maybe this is for Ken, and maybe this is for Gary, but what are we looking at in terms of what the 260,000 proposed transfer for revenue loss? What is it going to go towards? Do you have a sense?
Capital expenditure or capital repairs. I don't know what I call it. It's an expenditure, but capital repairs.
Repairs, yeah.
Going to dedicate, majority of that to capital. One, the roof, the dome roof that I talked about. That's $125,000 to do that roof. This is the first indication of what that is. The other thing that we need to desperately do is the bathrooms in the building are still 1962. So it's a semi-ADA accessible. So looking at that, that's going to pretty much go into those 2 projects right there. Anything left over would be the smaller projects that we have around there.
Okay, and then I have a follow-up question, if I may. So do you and the Fair Board have any sense of when you might look at your fees relative to the costs for the rental fees? And mostly I say that because I don't know, because we have the two things, the fair and the event center, it's somewhat confusing to me, forgive me.
Yeah, no,
But I just wonder, if we're putting money into it so that it can be a lower fee for people who are using the space, have you thought about comparing them so your costs match? At least what it costs to, at least what they're,
I generally compare them quarterly and report to the board.
okay.
Looking at, what the other facilities, it's hard.
Mhm.
It's really hard because of the facility, comparing apples to apples to others. Because any other facility that is similar to ours is a facility that was built in the last 20 years. And so, let's say just the arena rental itself. So we're at 700 a day, they're at 1,500 a day, just because the facility they have was built and they have higher expenses.
Well,
Ours is
forgive
a-
me, I thought I heard you say, that you should have 10 staff. And to do the work that you do, and you're doing.
Because
3.
what our problem is we're not just 9 to 5.
Mhm.
I mean, we started, my day on Sunday was started at 6.
Mhm.
And then my staff member didn't leave till 7 Sunday night.
Mhm.
And so by the time, and try to keep 2 people on at the same time just for safety.
Yeah.
And then try to rotate them on their days off. I could be exaggerating with 10, but maybe 8, but I mean, realistically,
Mhm.
for what we're doing and trying to do everything that we do, which is just not help that show, but also work on some of the repairs.
Sure.
So by the time you get rotation around and stuff, it takes a lot of people. I think, we do have a lot of volunteers. 4-H FFA, they volunteered to come out and help all the time. So that's relieved us a lot on that issue.
Mhm.
But as we go along, as the facility gets busier as it has been, there's a point that I'm gonna have to, I and the board are gonna have to make some decisions on staffing, increasing staffing and seeing if we can afford that.
And I'm just thinking, you said, well, we look at our space, and the space is older than other people's spaces, so we're charging half of the price, but if you don't have enough staff, then adding staff presumably that balances out. I just want to make sure that we're giving you the tools that you need in order to have enough staff to do the work, and that then you're charging the prices that are appropriate for that staff.
We are probably one of the busier facilities in
Mhm.
the state compared to some of the others. And that has to do with the price. I mean, I know that. We
Yeah.
all know that. Raise the price up, it's gonna go down because the smaller shows, everything's a horse show, or, whether it's a horse show, goat show, or whatever, all your smaller shows down to the quinceañeras and the Lewis Pavilion
Mhm.
won't be able to afford the facility if we go up like the others have had to go up. And that's not what we want. We want them, I'd rather be here complaining to you about that I don't have enough staff because, we're wearing the facility out, then no one's there, so there's only needs to be 1 or 2 of us.
Huh,
Because-
Okay,
Because there's no,
it's an interesting,
it's a dilemma. It's a hard,
yeah.
how do you get that balance? It's really
Mhm.
hard to get the balance of what it is and looking at the shows. And we're going to continue to be that way because you take a neighboring county, spent $45 million on a facility, that
Which
cost-
county?
north of us.
Okay.
Which-
I didn't even know they had a fairgrounds anymore, so. forgive
Oh,
me.
yeah, it's out by the airport.
Okay.
Okay, so, $45 million buys that facility, that's $10,000 a day
Mhm.
to rent one of the halls. And you've got to have a show that could be able to afford to, your return, because they're businesses that come to you and rent, whether it's a nonprofit or what have you.
Mhm.
And most of them can't afford that.
I would just say, Gary, that I want to make sure that we have enough staff for the work that we're expecting you to do. And I realize that that's the fair board really and not our responsibility as the budget committee, but
But it's a nice problem to have. I've been in business where we had too many staff and not enough business coming in. And I hate that end of the equation when you have to lay people off. Yes, But I want to be careful as we go along that we're not, we don't overstaff. And we don't burn ourselves out while we're doing that, but
Yeah.
we do it because we love it and,
And I apologize for asking lots of questions, but I feel like we need to have this discussion at some point is, I think obviously we have the responsibility to take care of the space.
Mhm.
But if we're taking care of the space and so therefore it's cheaper for people from the Portland area to come and use the space, I'm just not sure what our responsibility is to businesses from the Portland area who are coming here and using our spaces at a subsidized rate. So,
Yeah, it's a tough balance.
Yeah.
Because most of your clients are nonprofits with, young folks bringing their horses in and trying to
right.
win an award.
I mean,
It's-
well, he just said
it's
that
tough.
there were businesses.
Well, there are businesses, but there's also, take a 4-H group.
Mhm.
4-H group comes in and they have to rent the facility. The Fair Board has given them a discount, it's like a 10-15% discount
Mhm.
because it's a youth group. But, your tractor still costs you $150 an hour to operate with,
Yeah.
with an employee on it. And the lights, the water, the sewer, all that
Mhm.
goes into that equation. So, we try to be good about, good stewards of the facility, try to, as we look at having to raise the rates, and try to keep it affordable for those type of groups, because you get to the point where it's not affordable. And only the big groups, and it's not a new enough facility for some of these equitation shows that come in that are huge. I mean, we bring a lot of people into the county and they spend money here at all the businesses around, whether it be, one of the restaurants downtown, the wineries, all that, we do draw a lot of that in. So, I mean, we're a destination. I mean, we have calls, just like the fair. Last week I had a call from someone from San Diego, wanted to know what the lineup for the fair was. Because they planned their vacation around coming to the Yamhill County Fair, which you think is kind of bizarre, but they follow the music that we have, and there's someone on there they want to see. So they're planning their vacation to come up here for the week, bought their tickets online already, and staying at one of the hotels downtown. And so they're gonna, do the wine thing and come to the fair.
And I would say, Chair, there's no doubt that the fair does a lot of good economically in the community. But again, I'm asking you to look at, like, are we completely subsidizing with your labor groups that are coming and using the event center, right? Because the event center is different than the fairgrounds, and just making sure that we are not pouring money into it, or using Gary's labor simply so that a group can have a cheaper price than another adjacent venue.
I
And I'm not sure
see-
how we solve
No,
that, but
I agree. I mean, just as a business owner, that position here, and it's great to be busy. But at some point, you gotta, how do you taper that off to, be positive?
Right.
And I hear you, and I mean, I've heard you for years, and you are incredibly committed to the success of this, which is
Yep.
very encouraging. But I
I
do hear
mean-
you saying, there are probably times you are asking you and your staff to go above and beyond normal
Right.
commitment to make it successful.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I come from one of the most depressed industries. My career for years was in the machinery business. And I worked for a global company and that dealt with this daily, how many mechanics should I have? How many salesmen should I have? How many,
Yeah.
How many machines am I going to sell this year, and try to predict that? And then have to explain to a board of directors in Italy, why I didn't sell that many machines. So, I mean, it's the same balance. It's similar. I hopefully, I don't want you to think it's doom and gloom. It's not. It's positive. A lot more positive than it was when I first went on the fair board too many years ago, it was doom and gloom. I mean, I was one of the people that had to come up to the board of commissioners and beg them to, fund the fair enough to get us back into the black.
Yeah.
And that was averaging $40,000 to $60,000 a year. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that we have not had to do that for the last 18 years.
Yeah.
It was, it was embarrassing then, knowing full well that thing could do it on its own. And so, I'm pretty proud of that. But at the same time, it's a big balancing act, especially with, trying to do the staffing levels. And we're trying to fill two, part-time position and full-time position right now.
Chair, if I might.
Yeah.
To Commissioner Kulo's point, it's a tough place to be in because you serve a vital county function that we don't think of as a business necessarily. But then you're also trying to stay competitive with other counties. And a lot of counties have made bad investments or over investments in, I can't remember what we were calling them last time. They're not event centers, but what's the?
Oh, yeah.
Expo centers.
Expo centers, right? So they invest in these, they overinvest, and then they have to sort of compete for clients or business. So it's a tough position to be in, but I'm extremely impressed with you and your staff. I mean, through the wildfires, that was incredible what you guys were able to do, and just serve that vital role. And I enjoy coming to the fair board meetings and the knowledge, even of former Commissioner Leslie Lewis, her knowledge, her institutional knowledge, and the way she goes through your budget, and she knows, she can see the warning signs, right?
Yep.
And it's almost like a history lesson every time I attend a meeting. So I've thoroughly enjoyed being your liaison, and certainly appreciate the work that you guys do. And I did want to mention, though, in terms of the ARPA and the lost revenue, we did make a previous payment, right, in 21, 22 for 60 some, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was
Right.
for revenue loss for personnel. Some of it was COVID, some of it was wildfire, but so that did happen in the last budget cycle.
It was very well,
Yeah.
very much appreciated. That's how we kept it open the whole time.
Yep.
So, very much appreciated. And county staff has always been helpful to us, all the departments. So that's the reason why we try to help them out at the same time when they need something.
Yeah, and it's, you guys work so hard, and some of it's a labor of love, but I didn't realize how much you kind of compete for some of these shows in terms of the price point with other counties. So it is a difficult position to be in. How much can you raise fees to the point where you're actually turning people away? So.
Well,
Well, I would say that the
we're in a unique position because we're in the valley. Some of the other fairgrounds that are similar to us are in Eastern Oregon.
Yeah.
So the draw and the availability of, rooms, that type of thing is a plus for us. You're 60 miles from the beach, you have all the wineries around here, you have a lot of things around you, you have the aviation museum. That's why they come and pick us. And as we go along, yes, we will probably be right. We had this discussion actually this morning about that. But we want to make sure that that we still can do that as we go along.
And I was hearing Gary say that he needs 10 staff to do what they're currently doing right now. And that gives me a good sense of how I'm hoping we're providing him the tools. And if there's a request that comes with that so that he has the staff he needs, I'd like to hear that. And I also want to make sure that then we're not just paying for the staff to do event center work for an auction that comes to town because the prices are cheaper. And it's just like if we're looking at it in terms of the business side of it, we shouldn't be covering the cost of another business, right?
Yeah.
No,
But
No,
but I
I
want to make sure that he has the tools. So
right. No, I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
When I think you have two positions where that are empty, that you're
We're
searching
trying to
for.
fill right now.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so. it's sort of that same pressure that everybody else is feeling of trying to find people
Yeah.
to.
But thank you for it. I just want to make sure I know.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Gary. Again, to what Chair Bershauer was saying about during the wildfires, I went out there morning, noon and night, and you guys were out there and you never took a break and you did what had to be done. And it was amazing to see. So thank you to you and the volunteers and your staff. Question I had was, how are you being impacted by the lack of work crew labor? Or have you been?
Well, it's always an impact. And the biggest problem with that is that I go back to, the original when work crew was out at the fairgrounds was the overflow. So there was, I mean, even before Ken's time, we used to, they used to have 20 guys out there.
Yeah.
And those, it's gone from that dwindled down to maybe there's one or two guys amongst the work crew leaders. So yes, it is an impact. Our problem was that, the cost of the work crew leader and no help was more than what we could afford at that time because our income was zero. And that was the main reason. That was the main reason I had to make the tough decision what to do. I didn't want to get rid of them because the work crew has always been a good positive aspect of the fairgrounds.
Mhm.
I mean, today, I still have people come to me today that talk about they were in Oranges at the fairgrounds, 15 years ago. And they remember that they learned a skill
Mhm.
out there. It's a good program.
Yeah.
But the way that, guidelines and stuff are today, you're not gonna see that anymore. And so that's an impact. We were one of the few fairgrounds in state that even had that program.
Yeah.
And is that program gone? Is
Well,
there,
we can talk about it some more when the parks budget comes up as well, but
Okay.
it's one of those programs that during the pandemic, jail population was significantly low. And so the typical candidates for the AICs, the adults in custody that'd be eligible to come out for that type of program weren't in custody. On top of that, with social distance, everything else, you name it, the work crew program has been running on really skeleton crews, very limited resources. And it's been trending that way for several years. I think the pandemic was kind of the final straw, but so that's why you're going to hear that, in the parks presentation, and then you'll hear more about it during Jessica's presentation on Department of Community Justice, that's a program that we've had to scale back just because the numbers just aren't there like they used to be, to where you would have 20 plus AICs reporting to work crew and working in various locations across the county.
Okay.
So it's much smaller now. So that's I won't say that it's ended. It's just that it's been scaled back. And then hopefully moving forward, it'll be much smaller and just more of a flexible, limited crew that's going to be assisting in a lot of the same areas, but not in the same function. And it's taken me a while. You can tell I'm getting better about it because, of course, I had a lot of ownership when it comes to that program because I ran that program for years. So that's a hard one that we really had to look at doing something different because it didn't make much sense to have crew supervisors and departments paying for crew supervisors doing contracts and doing all this work all over the county. And the numbers just weren't there. They were doing the work.
Okay.
So. The one part that I would just add, just taking advantage of the time that I started talking, in looking at the budget, the one thing that I would just kind of call out, and along the lines of Commissioner Kula was bringing up, some of the concerns is if you look at the revenues for the event center, one of the concerns that I have when I look at it is you have 190,000 of that as beginning balance. And if you remember what I shared earlier, beginning balances are derived out of one-time cost savings that happened during a previous fiscal year. And then you have 260,000, which is a transfer for the ARPA funds for the revenue replacement in recognition of the impacts that the fair has had on events. So most of that revenue that you're seeing for this current budget year, more than half of it is one-time, either one-time funding or one-time savings. And then when you get down into materials and services and the personnel costs, half of those expenses are funded by that one-time cost savings or one-time revenue that's coming in. So I do think, it is within the purview of the committee when you're looking at the budget, and for the board when we're looking at this. I think the only reason that Gary's able to fund some capital improvements for the facilities is because of the additional ARPA funds that came in for this year. But there's going to be ongoing maintenance and operational costs. There's going to, that facility, I've been around it long enough that there's a lot of improvements that need to be made. Those buildings are not getting any younger. And, so it is something just to call attention to, that I think when you look at the revenues and expenses, just simply what's being presented here, I do think that it's going to require some further discussion down the road, because again, half of the revenues that are coming in here are the result of one-time savings or a one-time transfer. And it's really hard if most of your revenues are looking like that. Then you have to start looking at the sustainability of the maintenance and materials and services associated with being able to host these events.
And then I have another question, Chair, if that's okay. So first of all, thank you for laying that out. But then there was a conversation at some point about doing a master plan for the facilities. Is that still something that's happening, or is the Fair Board taking that?
Fair Board's interested, but it's trying to figure out how to pay for it right at this point.
To pay for the master plan?
So, the Fair Board's really has thought about, and it's a discussion in most meetings about, that. I'm like Commissioner said, I'm fortunate that I have a former commissioner who is a numbers person that sits on and holds me to the fire to make sure that, we don't do that. I mean, don't get ourselves in trouble, because, we do revenue projections monthly, trying to project out what we're doing, where we're at, how we're going to do that, and because a few of us were here when it was the other way around. And we don't want to be in that position ever again. But yes, back to your question, the master plan is a thought, and trying to figure out how we're going to get to that. There's a few things going on. I'm sorry. Is a few things going on that with the legislature in that regard. Whether it happens or not, I'm not sure, but I can guarantee you that we're going to take advantage of it.
Would you consider asking the budget committee for video lottery dollars to fund the master plan? I haven't looked into video lottery, but I'm just like, we're the budget committee, and you're saying you don't know where the money's going to come from, and I don't want to step in front of the Fair Board.
No,
obviously.
And they are working on a grant application, because I
Okay.
do know that there is a grant application that we're aware of that we're working on.
Okay.
The only hesitation I had before we start getting into Fund 26 is we haven't talked about Fund 26 to look at what funds are available.
Yeah.
And we're already, there's $70,000 a year that's being transferred from Fund 26 to the fairgrounds. So
Yeah. And
that's
since I
the only
can't,
reason I made that face.
and since I can't say, hey, please do a master plan, because I don't have any authority over you, I do have budgetary authority. So
I appreciate
get it.
that, but I think the thing is that we are very cautious in what we do. I mean, very cautious. We think about how we're going to do it, it's a plan. It's a plan, somewhat of a plan, but The master plan itself is something that we've been talking about for quite a while. It's something we're going to try to get done. And the future, it's getting closer to being, happening, but yeah, there are funds out, there's a grant out there that we're looking at. We have to be careful in some of the grants. So there's a lot of grants that we're not able to do because we're a county department, so. We are very aware of that.
Yeah,
and
I
trying to-
think the Fair Board, at least in the last meeting a couple weeks ago, they seem to be more focused on that possibility. Just because as we get closer to the buildings coming due for major repairs, it's sort of like, well, do we do that? Or do we go after a master plan in maybe a different location or whatever it is?
And I'm so sorry that I'm totally hijacking. Ken's like, okay, when are we gonna get back on top of this? But I feel like it's important for us to at least figure out what the relationship between is our fair and our event center, right? Event center, I mean, is it time to consider making it into a nonprofit or something like that?
Yeah, that's what they're talking about.
Okay.
So,
Okay, thank you. No further questions from me right now, but you've heard how I feel.
Thank you, Commissioner Cook.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you for your
Thank you,
time.
Gary.
thank you, Gary.
Thanks a lot, Gary.
Great job.
No pressure, Mark, but you got to get us back on schedule.
Yeah, I'm already behind. Boy, way
How-
behind.
I won't
far
ask you
behind?
any questions
It's still
because I already know
03.
the answers.
Yeah. So it's strange to believe I've been here 2.5 years, a third budget, and this is the first time I've been able to come before you all. So, and be in this room, I think it's been 2 years now. So maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but the parks are going through a reorganizational change starting July 1. Basically, the park divisions will be under Public Works. And I've been working with Jack Beach as well as Ken to try to make that as seamless as possible. So we do have good news here. A park manager is going to be starting next Monday. So then he will be taking on more of the parks, day to day than I've been doing, and Jessica. So I'll get right to it on our revenue. I want to point out first where it says it's 1081-334.99. It says other state grants. Well, that's just in case if we apply for a grant that we have a placeholder for it in the revenue line, and you'll see that there's an equal one on the expenditure line. So wanted to point that out, as well as Rogers Landing brings in, 24,000 there. And of course, I heard you just talk about video lottery dollars. We get $20,000 in revenue from that too. And that's all I have really on the revenue side, unless you have any questions. You're good? Okay. Next up would be personnel. So it would be a 1081-401.1 director. That is me. We have 5% coming out. That is to make sure it's totally transparent that none of my funds, the ask dollars, are actually going into parks. We want to make sure it be very transparent for everybody on that. And then you have your division manager, who is at 80% within parks. He is 10%, which is an HCP Habitat Conservation Plan. And another 10% would be on work release, which is under Jessica Beach. And then community service supervisors, we've gone from an FTE of, well, right below that, 1081-403.25, and FTEs of 1.5 to 2 FTEs now within parks. The third supervisor will be in the work crew, and Jessica Beach will be presenting that tomorrow. I'd like to point out 1081, 482, extra help. Little definition on that. That's actually for 2 park rangers for summer help. 32 hours a week on that. And of course, as your FETs go up, your roll-ups and your benefits go up. So below that extra help, a lot of those numbers are a little higher. Anything on personnel? Okay. On to material and services. I just point out a little bit about what contract services is. That's 1081-61102. That's like tree removal, water testing, like at Grenfell Park, some startup. You have porta potties. You have to obviously pump out our septic restrooms that are there that aren't pumped in. And then you have dive inspections. We have to do dive inspections in the docks at Rogers Landing each year.
Not the
So-
restrooms, the docks.
So I totally
Sorry,
had
thank
that,
you.
and it was
Got ahead of
awful.
myself.
Seamless,
Yeah.
I'm glad
Thank
someone's
you.
listening to me.
hard recruiting for that spot. huh?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
would be.
The
There is
pay's
sometimes
good,
you gotta
the
do
pay's
diving
good.
to find things in those porta potties, but that's
Or-
not something people want to do. So, any questions on contract services? Okay, so a placeholder for new grants, that's what I was talking about, a placeholder and the revenue. Right now, we're working with Marine Board for improvements at Dayton Landing. That's been something that's been in the works for quite some time. Not sure if that's going to be a matching grant or actually even how much funds are going to come from the Oregon Marine Board, but want to put a placeholder in for that. If we got to come up with a matching fund. Next is motor pool. We're basically taking 2/3 of the crew, pickups, the trailers and the fuel. And then the other third is going to be in work release, which Jessica will be presenting for that. Anything on material and services? All right, on to capital. I do have a placeholder there at the 1081, 830, 10. And it says, Lafayette Cascade, I went to Cascade Locks because I'm from there. But Lafayette Locks Park improvements. Now, that's really a placeholder there because there's a great need to do an improvement on the two bridges at Ed Grenfell Park as well as Metzger. I've talked with my bridge people and I think we can do some repairs on the bridge at Ed Grenfell Park. Right now, it's load rated for 6,000 pounds, 3 tons, which is basically a van, that's fully loaded. So no one can cross that bridge at this time. Looking at trying to get in there in August and actually replace a couple beams and some head walls. And that way we can open that back up to at least a 12-ton limit so we can get in there. We don't have to replace the whole bridge, but we can easily do the repairs. Any money that's left over from that, of the 20, we can be looking into Metzger Park. I have not looked at that, what repairs need to be happening with that bridge though. So even though it says Lafayette Locks, we might be using it for bridge repairs. So anything on capital? Okay. The other one I have actually, I think you all have a memo for additional requests at one time for county parks to do a master plan. Got $100,000 in there. The last time a Parks Master Plan has been updated was 19 years ago. And technically, you're supposed to be updating a master plan every 10 years. So we tried to shave some of the materials and service costs as well as some capital to try to offset some of that cost, but we just couldn't come up with an extra $100,000. Any questions on the ad? Okay. Ken, did you have anything?
No.
Okay.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry.
Thank you,
I
Mark.
was just thanking him. I wasn't
You are.
thanking him for the
All right,
committee.
we'll see you in a few moments.
Thank you.
All right, and so for the next part, immediately after the parks budget, starting on page 32 is Fund 29, which is the county system development charges. And Justin,
Yeah. So Fund 29 System Development Charges, or SDCs as they're commonly referred to. Those are fees collected at the time that building permits are paid for at the county planning department. So these fees account for a structure. Usually it's a new structure's impact upon public systems, public infrastructure. So for Yamhill County, SDCs are used to enhance or add capacity to our parks. 60% of SDCs go to the fairgrounds and 40% go to our other county parks in our park system. So SDCs, they're restricted funds per ORS that can only be used on capital projects for the impacted systems that are outlined in the SDC methodology. I think an example of this, a current example may be that Ed Grenfell Park restroom. I think we're using SDCs to pay for additional usage at the park. So that's accounting for that. So also in Fund 29, we have a pass through for the Chehalem Parks and Rec District. That's 2981 in that line there. To come up with our SDC revenue figures, we just look at the building permit trends with Planning Director Ken Friday and project just over a 12-month period there. And so looking at that, we anticipate that building is really kind of peaked, and we're going to see a little bit of a decrease in the number of building permits issued. You know, not only looking at trends, but also as far as available material and labor shortages. And so it's just kind of how things are looking right now. You have any questions on Fund 29?
Justin, my only question is where does the fair improvements show up in the fair budget? I was just curious. Because there's two.
These are not any expenses that are SDC eligible,
Mhm.
that if Gary or even if Mark, or the parks
Yeah.
manager, any expenses associated that were eligible for SDCs would be coded directly to Fund 29, the actual expenses.
Got
We
it.
don't do a
we
transfer
don't do a
of
transfer and then
funds
you guys-
or handle it that way. So
Sweet.
Ed Grenfell restroom, that was built. The costs for the new restroom that was put in were charged directly to the expense lines in Fund 29.
Awesome. Super helpful. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ken.
Hello there.
I can.
Want me to
Hey.
go?
You are up.
All right. Well, obviously, 2021 was a challenging year. I just want to take a moment to praise and thank all of our staff who quickly adjusted to whatever was thrown at them, and a lot of things were thrown at them. And I especially wanted to thank Tim Cadiga and Alicia Lyle, who both helped with implementing changes quickly and efficiently. And just a reminder to the Budget Committee that planning is a fee-based department. And in January, I was cautiously optimistic for next year, so I proposed a fairly standard budget. I'm on page 33. And really, the only thing I have to highlight is right at the top, the beginning balance. And just I wanted to point out that the beginning balance is down this year. And it's no surprise that the last half of 2021 affected projects due to delay in supply chain issues. In addition, we've had wage increases with a new contract, but at the same time, while some of our fees go up, some of them don't. And I did come with a proposal to do some fee increases, but it was pointed out that, not a really good time in 2021. So I delayed those for a year. You might see those towards the end of 2022. And in fact, in researching this, I found that several of our fee categories have not been raised in over a decade. So another reason why we'll probably come back and ask for some. And just in thinking about it, the permit fees that we collect today need to pay for those inspections that we do in the months and sometimes years following. Anyway, due to that situation, we had less carryover. And so that's really the only thing I have to note on page 33. So if there are any questions, I'm going to go on to page 34. On page 34, related to positions, I need to note just a couple of adjustments. My senior planner, Stephanie Armstrong, retired last year, so I reduced the senior planner position and put in an associate planner position, which we're still recruiting for. In addition, because building was fairly steady and we were able to cover all inspections, I reduced the building inspector 3 position down by 1. I had thought possibly I would be hiring an additional one, but it didn't turn out to be a need. So the only other item I want to note is down towards the bottom line 611.05 GIS services. This is the $50,000 that we receive for our geographic information system. And this is the only general fund money we get for planning. And we will spend close to that amount this year because we are doing some projects, especially one with the assessor's office. And frankly, the expense for this is getting a little bit higher. So but if there are no questions, I was going to go on to page 36. I don't have anything on 35. So on page 36, solid waste. Staffing on this has not changed. The solid waste coordinator is split between this department at 0.6 FTE and planning for septic inspections with 0.4. The only specific item I want to note are the two lines under the beginning balance, and those are lines 343.11 and 343.12. Those are the Riverbend license fees for in-county waste and out-of-county waste. Because of a change in our contract, since Riverbend is not taking solid waste from the public, the contract was adjusted. We're guaranteed $150,000 for next fiscal year as the base minimum. And then the following 2 years, it's going to go down to 100,000 and then 50,000 and stay at 50,000. And I don't have anything else on that page. So page 37. Again, on the solid waste budget, the three items I want to note on this page are the roadside garbage pickup. It's Fund 670.03. That's at $25,000. A few years ago, it was more like $5,000. And the reason it's been higher this last year and this year I'm proposing is we're seeing a lot more RVs that are being dumped alongside the roads. In fact, I noticed it says we've only spent $700 this year. I believe this last month we can add another 3,000 to that, and I'm expecting some more because we're having trouble disposing of those. And an RV disposal can be anywhere between $2,000 to $8,000 around there. So I did increase that and kind of kept that as an increased fund. The next item I want to note is the RRR education program. It's line 730.12. It's $180,000, and that funds our 2 household hazardous waste collection events. We also, Ashley has done a paint-only collection event in Sheridan because she found a lot of the folks that were in line for the event were just dropping off paint. And so she wanted to get them out of that line and do another collection event down in Sheridan. It was a success. And the last item I want to note on this page is at the very bottom, the 990.03 reserve for future. Since Riverbend landfill is reduced in capacity and in anticipation of it closing at some point, I'm asking to move $300,000 to a reserve for a future fund. And that's all I've got on that page. And the next page, I think I give over to either Justin or
That's me.
Ken. Yeah.
All right, on page 38, it's the landfill license reserve. So as part of the fees and the agreement with Riverbend landfill, as part of that, there were funds being transferred into Fund 38. I want to say we stopped transferring the funds in 1920.
Or 2020.
Was it 2020 or
Probably
2019?
not 1920.
No, I meant
I'm
fiscal year
sorry. Yeah, I'm
1920.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Fiscal year 1920, with 2019, 2020. We stopped moving funds in just, because the revenues just weren't there to continue the transfer. Historically, this is another one of those similar to like I shared with ONC Fund, where we've received revenues, we have funds available for one-time grant awards or projects or things that may come up. So that's what this fund is. You'll see there is some revenue coming in, just pool and bond interest, and then there's from a interfund loan that we did, that there's repayments coming back into this fund from another department. So about halfway through on that repayment from Fund 40. So we, again, much like Woods Fee, we take the full amount, we keep it fully appropriated. It's there for deliberation or discussions on Wednesday about funding requests that may come forward today and tomorrow. At the same time, if there's no request approved on Wednesday, that these funds, we still fully appropriate this. So then during the fiscal year, if the Board of Commissioners receive a request and want to consider it, do we have funds available to help pay for that? So pretty straightforward, any questions? It's another one of these discretionary funds that there's really no restrictions or limitations to.
Chairman Bennett. So if nothing changes, this one for the next 4 years or so will gain another 200,000 or so just from the loan.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is something coming in because of that.
All right.
Anything else? Let's move.
I'm on page 39. And I'm kind of going to go over both surveyor and corner restoration, hopefully get this done in 3 minutes. These are two budgets or standard budgets with just a few exceptions, which I'll point out. In March of 2021, we hired Jason Foose as our new full-time county surveyor. And Jason brings a wealth of experience with him. He came from Mojave County, Arizona. He's licensed in Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon in surveying. And Jason has spent the last year assessing the needs of both survey and corner restoration and had submitted some requests, and I think you've got those memos. He's requesting $65,000 for department equipment, some of which hasn't been replaced since 1999. Since most will be used in corner restoration, he has proposed a split with 15,000 from survey, which is line item 543.01, about 3/4 of the way down the page. And then $50,000 from corner restoration fund in the budget. And so that is on page 41, again, 543.01 for department equipment. The last exception I have is on page 39, line 699. His requested money to hire a company to do electronic storage of the survey record. Presently, the survey record is in a number of formats, which includes paper, linen, Mylar copies. And the goal is to have this information more readily accessible by both the county employees and to the public. And so he's proposing to hire an outside firm to come in and assist with that. That's really all I've got.
Where is that one?
I'm sorry, that one is under other expenses, 699.01 towards the bottom of page 39.
Okay, thank you.
Lennon? Yeah. Yeah, and we've got a whole bunch of air photos from 70, 80 years ago, even that, we have them in pullouts right on the outside of his office, and they don't get used very much, but when they are used, they're very useful and they're very helpful. And so we don't want to get rid of them, but they're big, cumbersome, and they're starting to get pretty dog-eared, so.
And the surveyor came in and did a presentation and a department update recently and laid out just like how many records we do have that are very, very valuable. It was
And Jason-
compelling to me.
And Jason will be here next year given this, but I put this budget together kind of this last thing, and so you're back on time.
We're back on time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director.
Nice job. Thank you,
Thank
Ken.
you, Ken.
All right. Next on the agenda is a break.
All right. Well, I say we take a 5-minute break.
Actually, next presentation is in 15 minutes.
Oh, we'll take a 15-minute break.
15-minute
All
break.
right. Try for 15 minutes. Right. Let's bring the meeting back to order.
Are we ready?
We are ready.
Welcome back, Mark
Welcome back.
Welcome
yes.
back, Russ.
And Russ, my fleet manager here.
and
Uh,
Tara.
Tara, that's right.
Tara.
He's a new office manager because Catherine Lindbergh had retired last Thursday.
Welcome. Nice to meet you.
Welcome.
So, okay, I'll jump right into the Chehalem North Valley Intersection Reserve, which is 11-001-301.01. This is an ongoing thing. We'll just keep it in there till we get reserves up to a point where we can do intersection improvement.
1 second, Mark. We're on page 43.
My bad.
Yeah, I was in the back.
So Chair,
Yes.
if I might. Sorry, I had a candy. What are you working towards on that? What, is there a goal for the,
Nothing at this point at all.
okay, we're just keeping money aside and,
And I don't think it even really increases. So
Okay.
whoever, this is what I think it is. This is just someone developed within that intersection that affects an intersection. They have to pay so much dollars into that to improve it. I think that's a shared, at the term, I use it in the city all the time,
Okay.
but you have to pay for a future improvement of what their development is going to impact that intersection.
okay. And Commissioner Coyle, was that on your list of what you guys were looking at or?
No,
Okay.
no, it wasn't. Yeah.
So what is the purpose of this? I mean,
Well,
when would it be spent?
It's system development, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
For an improved intersection.
it's monies that the county received for the specific, project that we received it. We're not ready to spend it, but we can't spend it on anything else. So we have to reserve it and we carry it for the budget because at some point with that development, they're anticipating that we're going to be making those improvements. And this is to help offset our cost to that. And until a project actually happens, we're going to be carrying this reserve year to year until a project actually comes forward. And that's why it's in a contingency as well, because it could happen, but there's no requests or no project in the works right now.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Okay, next we'll move on to Russ, the motor vehicles.
All right. 1129, motor vehicle fleet.
Make sure you talk into the
All
microphone.
right. Yeah, 1129 motor vehicle fleet. You see an increase there. As fleet, we receive 12.52% of state highway tax allocation. And then also some of the revenues that we bring in from the other departments there, you can see. But nothing really major unchanged there. As far as FTE, our FTE for going forward next year is the same as it was last year at 5.91. Just a little different coding on the fleet manager position there. That's the only real change in personnel. Yeah, go to the next page there. On materials and services, the big thing that really sticks out is fuel. When we presented our budget to the county administration on fuel was the day that fuel just went to the moon. And it's just anybody's best guess at that time as to where it was going to stop. And, we're still trying to figure that out. But personally, I feel that it has leveled out. And I think with, the current administration in office that would like to get reelected, I don't think we're going to see the fuel prices to continue to go up. I think we're stabilized and probably we'll see fuel prices maybe go down or as an average, I think we're at the top right now. Currently, we use 92,000 gallons of unleaded each year and we're paying $3.61 per gallon. That's because we don't pay federal tax on our gasoline. So it's cheaper there. And two, we're paying $4.12 for diesel, but we don't pay state or federal tax on diesel. So that gives us a little advantage there. So in our budget, you see there in the proposed budget is at 272,131. Realistically, I think we're gonna end up at 332 for unleaded. And for diesel, we're at 135 and probably should go to $206,000 for the diesel, but we have not made those changes yet. 542.03 boot and clothing allowance. That's something fairly new that was negotiated with the Union and Public Works. So we have an increase there. But no other real major changes in our materials and services in 1129. If you go to capital there, you'll see $25,000. When we built the shop, originally we were gonna be combined with Chemeketa Community College, and they were gonna use a portion of the shop for classroom there, and that deal kind of fell through at the end. So we didn't extend our crane all the way down into the welding shop area because they were gonna be in there. But now they're not going to be in there, and a few years have passed. We'd like to extend the rails back down in the shop, so that's part of what this money will be used for. And that's all I have for 1129. Any questions?
Okay,
Thanks, Travis.
Get into engineering. So basically, state highway funds, we have there almost 2.5% state highway funds going there to fund this sub fund, I guess you'd say, but then Fund 11, there's nothing special or change within the revenue whatsoever. This last year. Okay, on to personnel. Just want to point out that FETs do stay the same, but also 115541.31 solid waste environmental. That's actually Brian Burnham, who runs our Cove Orchard sewer service district, if you wanted to know. And then down under 1155.403, 17 engineering tech. That is our these are our engineering intern who works with us for a full year, and usually they come from George Fox University. Other than that, nothing within personnel has changed. Well, up to a little higher because it's just you know, what we live in right now and budget instructions. General services within engineering, we do have a new item that Russ talked about. That is a 1155.542.03 food and clothing allowance. We wanted to be transparent, exactly show where our clothing allowance comes from. That's part of the union negotiations in there. And then professional services, 1155.610.01. That's actually $10,000 that we actually pay out to George Fox University. There's a senior project on an intersection. We have I guess you'd say the RAC committee has actually voted on, and we've actually taken on and come up with plans, specs, surveying, everything. So it's almost shelf ready for us to go out for bid and they're done with it. So it's been a great opportunity to work with those students there. Anything on the services of engineering?
Including the land bridge, right? Isn't that what that one is called? The land bridge? Okay, what's right? We'll talk about that later.
So Chair, if I might, Mark, on the state highway funds, so it looks like it's pretty consistently under 150. So can you explain that, why it's budgeted so high? Did I miss something?
Which line are?
Under revenue, engineering revenue,
Mm-hmm.
actuals are 123, 136. Year to date is 125, and yet
We had adopted last year 197.
mhm.
Well, we did make some changes and some adjustments with the positions in here. If you remember correctly, before Bill Gilly retired for the 5th or 6th and final time, he was only a partial, like a 0.2 FTE in this budget. And when he retired and we recognized the need to bring on a full-time staff, and actually we increased the FTEs in this division with the hiring of Greg Kastner and then with the interns. And so we ended up with a full-time engineering projects coordinator that replaced a .2 county engineer. And so again, the changes in the numbers reflect that. So it's a much smaller number years ago, but with the increased cost of the FTEs, and just a reminder that they have a percentage. So he's taking the gas tax, he's getting that one check, and then he's applying, Mark is applying the percentage that breaks it out to the various divisions.
With a higher percentage for this.
And so
Okay.
it increased that percentage to cover for the additional FTE that was
Okay.
built into that.
Makes sense.
It was like one.
Correct me if I'm
No,
wrong.
That's it. Sorry to say, but I forgot all about Mr. Gilly.
But I like.
And talking to your mic.
Not
Mark.
really in my lane, as I
Go
say,
ahead.
but going back many years ago, the engineering division was much bigger. And it had grown quite large and maybe not as effective as it should have been. And then it was brought down very small and, found probably where the bottom is. We know where the top was, and then we found the bottom. And now I've been there 35 years. I think it's a great level right now, personally.
Great, thank you.
It's called the three bears approach, right? This one's too small, too big,
Oh,
just
yes.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think we're at a great point, really, really good.
And Mark, make sure if you pull the microphone,
There we go.
you got to
Is that-
really talk into it.
Okay, I'll scream like I did soccer coach. Okay. All right, so road fund 1160, 301, beginning balance. That's a pretty big numbers because we did no bridge replacement work, as well as the increase in gas tax. When we were, I think it was Oasis, I was working at Oasis on really where our gas tax would be with this COVID pandemic. And they all thought projections would be really low. In fact, it was the opposite. People didn't stay home. They got in their cars and they drove. So our gas revenue actually went up instead of down. So that's why that number is so high. And also why, if you go down to 1160, 335.01, the state highway funds, that number is a lot bigger, talking 7.8 million. And just the year before, with the budget amount was 7.1 the year before. So definitely people drove more during the pandemic than anticipated. Want to point out 1160, 335.16, the reimbursement. That's actually a state transportation plan fund. And that actually is a number that comes right in from ODOT. And we actually then just give it right back to ODOT for the bypass. This year, it's a lot higher. That number does fluctuate year to year. So going through the numbers there. Do want to point out reimbursement on mine. It's 1160 362.12. It says reimbursement. And you can see that year to date, we have almost 16,000 in there. That's actually reimbursed, insurance reimbursements for people who hit maybe a guardrail or a sign. And that's why that number is so much bigger than yours. If you look in the past and what we have budgeted, just don't know how many people are going to hit signs. So, or guardrails,
Or how much they'll reimburse for.
or even that, that's true. Anything on the revenue of 1160? Well, okay, now on to personnel. You go to the director, number one there, you got 1160, 401.01. That's been reduced from 0.7 down to 0.65. There's that 0.05 that's parks. And then you have HCP at 10%, engineering 10%, and motor pool at 10%, get you to the 1 FTEs. Down at division managers, which is 1160, 401.32. It went from 1.3 to 1. That's because we had one individual who was retiring and we still needed him, carry him over to the next budget year for a few months. Then road supervisors went from 2 to 1. That's 1160, 401.63. We're looking at possibly hiring 2 road supervisors. Instead, we hired just 1. And we took that other FET and we put them down to more of the crew person as a medium equipment operator. So then you go down to medium equipment operator, which is 1160, 405.15. You've gone from 9 to 12. That's additional of that road supervisor. And also we paid out for a road crew supervisor through work release program. And so that person now needs to be a work crew supervisor. So he's coming out of basically the fund of public works. I mean, excuse me, that person's coming out, but the FET is going to stay within the budget. Of course, once you raise some of your FETs a little bit and some of your forecasting for your increases of step increases, your roll-ups do go up a bit. Any questions on personnel? Okay, hospital and services. New line item, which would be 1160-515-04, material disposal. What we're finding is we're having difficulties finding places to put our spoils, our ditch spoils. So we're anticipating possibly having to pay a landfill. There is some empty quarries that are around, but they want it to be environmentally friendly. We have to test the spoils, and that costs a lot more money than to just pay someone outright. We do have a lot of good places we can dispose of our spoils during the summer. And of course, this month has been very, very wet. So we've had a problem actually taking our spoils somewhere that somebody will accept them. So we're anticipating possibly having to pay that out. That's kind of a line item placeholder, I guess you could say right there. Go down to culverts, which is 1160-530-02. We're finding we need to replace more culverts and more repair some of our large culverts. This is just strictly for material. We get a little bit further down into capital. That's where we cover the cost for actually having it engineered. So there's an increase there. Then two new line items, 1165-42.03, food and clothing allowance, and followed below that is 1165-42.02, CDL training and physical. Right now, when someone comes in and they do not have a CDL, before you could have just somebody on your staff train that person. Now that person has to go through a training program like Jamaica. So we now take those new candidates and we have to get them trained up through Jamaica, and they have to pass their CDL test. And then they can start driving dump trucks and all of our CDL equipment. So there's an additional cost there within training just those personnel. That's why it's so good if we can get people in that have that CDL already, but those are hard to come by. And then the clothing allowance, I want to be transparent exactly how much we're paying for clothing allowance, and we used to put that down into safety equipment, but we wanted to make it transparent in what we were doing there. Go down to contract services, which is 1160-61102. This basically roughly about 300,000 more. We needed to catch up on some more ditching. We have additional 300,000 in there. That's for actually contracting it out. But recently we've looked at some of our numbers and we think we can actually do contract flanking. And we actually can have our crew do more of the physical work. We do have a new excavator that finally got here over a year in waiting. So now we have 2 excavators to work in the ditches. So that's it's kind of a placeholder there. Hopefully we don't have to use it, but if we do, it's there so we can get more work done out in the field and not have our guys do the flagging. Equipment rental has gone up. That's 1160-652-02. We're renting more equipment like for the crack seal and safety boards. You might have seen that out there. They're now putting, instead of just having a flagger out there, we're trying to get like ODOT has some of those reader boards out there to let people know that the construction's coming ahead or construction's happening, or maybe it's next month to give an idea. We have been lucky so far and bought 2 of our own signs, but we also can rent them if we need to. So that's why that line item is a little bigger than previous years. So then motor pool is in there at 1160-780-05. One of the bigger items in there is actually / a dump truck or a 5th wheel tractor. That's $200,000, but we weren't sure which one on there, but that's why that number is a little bit bigger than previous years. But we have, as you can see in there, a chipper, a grader, flail mower, spray truck, and another crew truck within the motor pool line item there. If you go down to 1160-780-68, there's that intertransfer from community justice where we used to have that work crew supervisor. That's why that number is 0 in this year's budget. And you can go to year to date and see a number, and you can go to your left and see actuals. That person now is not part of the crew of Public Works. He's now strictly work release. Any questions on material and services? Okay, so on to capital. It's 1160, 81102. I did come to the board and present the overlay, our capital improvement project we were going to do. More of full depth repair, some chip seal and some bridge work. That's contract. And then below that, through professional services to design those projects, that's 1168, 82102. And again, that's there to design not only those projects with capital improvement projects, but also probably looking at maybe some big culverts. We're talking the 6 or 8 foot diameter type size. A new line item in capital is small building construction, 1160, 830, 08. That's for possibly a covered sand shed on the south side of the county, west side of the county, excuse me, and possibly emergency generator. Right now, if power did go out, we had emergency, there'd be no way to keep power going at Public Works. So we're looking at having a portable generator as well. And that's it for capital. Within 1160. Questions? Okay. On to bicycle path, footpath, which is a 40, I'm not sure what page, I don't have that on here, but
Page 51.
51 it is. Talking Fund 41, 30, 301, 01 and beginning balance. Basically, we're just banking that. It's we have to put in each year 1% of gas tax. And depending on more gas tax, the more money goes into the bike footpath. I've found out that we can actually hold that money on for 10 years and then do a project. So instead of just taking 50,000 and trying to find somewhere to do something with footpath or bike path, why not, build it up, possibly up to $1 million and do a true bike path in there. So we're in year 3 right now of 10. So probably in about 5 more years, we'll be looking at some kind of project and going through probably some public process to find out what is the best project for that. So that's why that beginning balance just keeps growing and we're not really spending anything in that account. And that's all for that one. If anybody else any questions? Okay. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Russ.
All right, Fund 45, the Motor Vehicle Replacement Fund. First thing I look at is 301.02, if everybody's there, is reserve fund for the fuel island. We used to have underground fuel storage tanks out at the shops, and we changed that to above ground tank. But we'd set up a reserve fund for future, for repairs or rebuilding on that. And you can see we've got reserved there $290,000 currently, and then Public Works contributes $17,000 a year to that fund. And then for every mile that each vehicle drives, they contribute a penny per mile in there. So that's how they accumulate the funds over the years. So at some point we may cap that or not. There definitely will be needs upgrades in the next 10 years, but it's good to have that money there ready for that. 301.41 is our self-insurance fund, is like we like to call it. It's mainly for collision repairs of our own vehicles and the fleet. The motor vehicle cars, sheriff cars contribute 3 cents per mile into a fund for that. So if we have, cars damaged or vandalized or something, we have the funds to do those repairs as needed. And 380.11, that is fleet maintains all the motor pool vehicles and sheriff's department vehicles, that sort of thing, which they pay us to, for the travels, and that's where we collect that at. Materials and services, no real changes there. Then capital, you'll see 80.81. That's where we collect money for the grader replacement. For many years, we've done guaranteed buyback options on the graders, which has been a great program since 1996. But the grader market's kind of getting flooded with machines, so our buyback values haven't been as good as it used to be. So we may opt out this year, but that remains to be seen to see what they offer us for the machines in the upcoming year. But we'll still reserve the funds there for the future on that. 802.02, that's where we reserve the funds for sheriff department vehicles, all the motor pool cars, that sort of stuff. And 302 or 802.04, again, the funds for the collision insurance. And the actual reserve funds, 990.05, again, for the fuel island, and reserve for vehicles that can be invested more heavily, I guess you'd say. And that's about all I have for Fund 45.
Okay, back to me, the habitat conservation, everybody there? Okay.
Mhm.
So again, this is a fund that's been going on since 2014. We're in year 8 of that. So we have state highway funds there, which is 52, 62, 3, 3507. That's actually so many dollars per year per the plan. We're in year 8, so between years 5 and 10, because of the HCP policy, we have to put $31,286 in there. Within that is also Dr. Hammond, who does his butterfly surveys in there, CPI, and then an adjustment to balance within revenues there. So that's in the revenues. Personnel, none of that's changed. Got 10% for me, 10% for the Parks Division Manager on there. And that's your material and services. Then down it basically, that's personnel. Then in material and services, you have other expenses. There's your butterfly survey expense, Dr. Hammond. He went from 5,000 to 6,000. It's the first time he's had an increase since 2014. And then you have your internal services there, which is 52, 62, 7, 80.16. Basically, any work that Public Works actually does within this fund, HCP pays Public Works for that work, and then we end up putting it back in the beginning for the revenue. So it's a bit of a circle. So the fund is always fully funded for that time. And I think it go on for quite some years yet. I think in year 10 through 20, it drops a little more for what we have to put in there for revenue. The last line down there, we just want to point out the reserve fund for future. Right now, Fish and Wildlife pay 50% of Dr. Hammond's survey. At some point, I'm being told that could go away. So we're banking a little money in there just in case that does happen in the future. And that is everything for HCP. Okay, any questions?
I figured that I would, I was like, is Jason gonna ask if I were, doing habitat conservation? Bless you, but he must know.
Oh, my bad.
Maybe he doesn't, maybe he doesn't. It looks like he
Everybody
knows.
asks
so-
Every year, someone
Yeah.
asks about the
Yeah,
butterflies.
it's a result
I
of
you know, I was
litigation.
going to ask a question and I thought somebody might go,
No,
we
sorry
don't know
about
the
that.
answer.
Endangered butterflies that are almost delisted, right?
Right.
Within
Right.
days.
And it was based on litigation that, or was it threatened litigation or filed litigation for Endangered Species Act? And so, well, you had to go through quite a bit to develop a habitat conservation plan and this project and mitigation sites for managing Kincaid's lupin and the fender blue butterfly.
So it has its own fund.
Okay.
Question, so I'm wondering at what point will that not be no longer necessary? At what point do we have a sort of a continuum of where the species is in terms of when we get to, because that's a chunk.
It is, and I'd have to look at the policy, but I think it's a 20-year period. I bet at year 15, you probably have to reevaluate the policy.
Yeah.
I can let you know once I read the It's a-
Gotta,
it's a
gotta read
good-
the plan.
It's a
read the
it's a thick
HCP.
thing. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I can get
But
it to you.
it is moving from endangered to threatened, and that's a
Yeah.
pretty big deal.
Very good.
Okay.
Anything else? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
I guess, I'm sorry, Bill, before you guys get up, now that you're standing up. They did, during Russ's presentation, he made mention about the fuel costs and that's something that I know we just started having the conversation kind of late. We're not ready to necessarily have any proposals or make any changes to the current budget, but it is something that I'm anticipating that between now and budget adoption, we may have to make some revisions to the budget to reflect the increased costs associated with fuel. Just keeping in mind, the reason we're not really wanting to do it right now, because there's a couple different paths that we could take to address this. And I'm not ready to go into those deep, kind of, because one of the options, as part of the budget instructions, we tell every department what to budget for fuel and replacement costs. And if we were to say new rate, we would have to make 20 some changes throughout the budget to increase those costs, to make sure that we're capturing that. And so that's why we're not ready, because I have some options that I'll probably have a conversation with the Board of Commissioners between now and prior to budget adoption, once we're able to sit down, the four of us and kind of chart out a proposal on how we're going to address it going into the new fiscal year. Or maybe fuel prices will improve between now and July 1. Who knows?
Not likely.
Well, it's what, $120,000, right? It's a good chunk of money, the discrepancy.
Oh, yeah, it's big.
Yeah. Okay.
And, but the concerns that I have is if we go out to departments and we're saying, hey, we're now raising your increases. And if I go to 20, all the various departments and then all of a sudden those 20 departments are going to be coming here and making additional discretionary requests to also increase that. So I have some thoughts. I'm just not ready to fully vet them. So my recommendation would be, as we approve the budget, as we go through this week, as is with those fuel costs, and we have it flagged to have another discussion that prior to adoption, we may need to increase or take some kind of action to ensure that we have sufficient funds in Fund 11 to cover those fuel costs. And then we can figure out long-term on how that's going to be covered by the departments as well. So.
Yeah, and we build in actual increases per gallon that they use, because we monitor every, month of what each vehicle uses, how much per gallon.
Mhm.
And we have a limit that we're, want to pay out of cents per mile, and anything above that, we transfer over. So we have some good numbers to work with that can fluctuate from month to month. As the fuel prices go down, they'll immediately see those savings. So,
Right.
Mhm.
or
So-
increases.
Sorry, I know you guys stood up, but I just wanted to, because I know you presented that and we've been having conversations of late about that, but at this point, without necessarily getting into all the details during this week, I think we'll be better positioned with the recommendation here in the next couple of weeks. So, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We're hearing from folks who say they can't hear from those mics or when Mike speaks and that mic, so it's confusing, so Mike and Mike.
And I don't think your microphones are on.
Anyway, yeah. You know. Anyway, what I just said.
Nobody heard it.
Okay, so the next one is, we've got some more general admin, internal services. I know we did some of them this morning. So we're gonna see how many we can get through here really quickly. Why don't we start on page 89? And the tab is called mediation. And it's right after the law library. Everybody there? I'm waiting for Justin to get there because this one's his.
The numbers are messed up, so. just
I don't
go
know.
to the tab.
There's a tab.
I feel like
it's
I'm really
Look at
close
those.
to it.
You are.
Community
you're-
services right behind
If
law
you're like
library.
88, it'll be just a little bit further back.
Would be forward.
Depends upon your
Yeah.
perspective. right?
All right. Okay. So this 1059, this is really a pass through. It's money collected via fines imposed by the courts that we in turn help them pay for mediation services. So a judge, may order a couple to attempt mediation. And that, if they're filing for divorce or something, and then that couple will meet with the mediator and we receive the invoice, and till that fund is depleted, we keep paying for it. But you can see that during the pandemic, mediations occurred much less. Courts were not operating at full capacity. And so you didn't see the usual level of court business going on there. Yeah, as a result, we didn't quite spend down as much as in years prior. So we have a much healthier beginning balance that we're carrying over this year. So pretty small, easy budget. Any questions? All righty.
Okay, so the next one,
Economic development.
now, that's tomorrow. County schools, page 91. And that one's mine.
I'm assuming that's fine.
Huh?
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Oh, that was good. Thanks, Ken. County school funds is money that comes in from federal forest money each year. And we're required to receive it, and then we distribute it out to county schools based upon a formula that we're provided. So we do also get electric co-op tax money that goes into that fund. So we accumulate the money during the year, and then in June, I will distribute that to all the school districts in the county, all the county school districts, pardon me. And that's the extent of that. The forest money comes in, I think, in May as well. So we don't really know what that is at the moment, but it's usually around $40,000.
All right. Any questions on county schools, Fund 15? All right. Okay, so the next one, we will go to, this is going to be back under the general government tab. And it's on page 100, commissioners. It'll be going further back that way.
Look for a purple tab there.
It's a little bit out of order, Jason. So if you look for the commissioner purple tab,
Yeah, okay, got it.
I just listened to that guy.
Thank you.
I was like, "Whoa."
Yeah, sorry, we're going to be doing some jumping around because our internal services and admin are all over the place. And we're taking advantage of being a little ahead of schedule. So we're going to try to hammer through as many of these internal service ones as we can. All right, so 1013, the commissioner's budget. This is where the commissioners and the support staff is budgeted for, and new for this year, they did move, and Justin put this budget together and moved a portion of my position also into this, just to kind of reflect that I am kind of a split personality between 1010 and 1013. So the revenues in here are pretty straightforward. We have internal admin charges on top of discretionary. That's really the only two revenues. The budgetary lines that you see for the three commissioners, we take the compensation committee and budget committee approved budget, multiply that by 3, and then that's what we use for the number. Doesn't necessarily reflect the actual amounts that each commissioner may be making, because each commissioner can make up to that full amount, but if they turn down a pay increase or elect not to do that, they could be making less than that. Seems like we have that question every single year, and we'll have more conversations on that on Wednesday morning with the compensation committee. So there's a portion of my position and then our outstanding team of support staff who are sitting at the table to the left of me are also in this fund. And really not a lot of further changes. I think the only change that was in here is the moving of the county administrator, or a portion of the county administrator's budget into 1013.
I was just making an editorial comment that I was like, didn't he build this budget?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess the only thing I'd point out would be there in materials and services. The only thing that kind of sticks out to me is 1013, 513.06 and software. Looking back, you can see that we really didn't have much expense there. We have 10,000 in there now. That pays for our Zoom account for streaming commissioners meetings. You know, it's something new that we started doing during the pandemic. So that's why you don't see a lot of prior history there.
Correct. Yeah, they don't give away Zoom.
No.
So other than that, I think the only other area, I gotta put my glasses on. We do have 699.00. You're going to see that we have what's called a commissioner's discretionary. So we do have funds that are built into that, $1,500 each for each commissioner each year. It's a longstanding practice that we have that available. So if there's a request or something that an individual commissioner is wanting to provide support for, there are funds available for each commissioner to use those funds. So without necessarily going through a whole coming back through the budget or making a request, that we have those funds available.
So Ken, does that reflect those funds that haven't been dispersed yet?
I was just recalling our conversation last year about your honey pot of commissioner.
I'm saving it up.
Yeah, and that's one because we're on a year-to-year budget and we appropriate that amount,
But it's in
that
your
anything that's not there would have been carried forward in the beginning balance, but this a budget document, we don't necessarily build up like a savings account in the individual line. So but I do have the means that if there were a discussion to fund something and you wanted to have that discussion, I can easily backtrack in the previous fiscal years and we can look at this expenditure history within those individual lines and determine how much is available. And then it would be up to discussion with the board and then we could go forward.
Question. So if each commissioner is given $1,500 a year,
Mhm.
and some commissioners make a decision to expend that to various community things, that's not something that we've typically had come before the board.
No, we
So,
haven't.
so because I've been a good little commissioner and saved my money for a rainy day and a big project, am I gonna get dinged for that?
No, absolutely not.
That was the right answer.
Well, I'm just gonna, would it be something, I mean, from what I heard was, well, when we'd bring it back up, then it sounds like it'd go to a vote. Like you said, at that point you go back and then you'd have to bring it before everybody.
I
So
would
then
just
that actually then go
May
to a
depend
vote
on the
of
amount
approval?
as well.
It depends on the amount, and if we look at that, the only thing that I would say is if not necessarily a vote, but I would just say in case a majority of the board objected to that methodology or that thinking on how this was applied, I just wanted to make sure that we had a discussion without me necessarily being in the hot seat like I usually am.
Like you are right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we've never done a vote, but it would be interesting to know, because we don't talk about where we send discretionary. Be interesting to know where we have
Mhm.
I mean,
before. Maybe we do like a yearly check-in or something.
It is possible. I know that it's possible because I know how budgets work, that that a reserve would be created. Right? And we don't have any reserves in this budget, but
So wasn't
Well,
it,
actually you do. You have an
Yeah.
ending
Oh,
balance of
you already-
$132,000.
it
So
was-
technically, if the board and the
oh, we
committee
could
said
create- yeah.
that we want to increase it and you want to have this dollar amount, again, we build this budget, it's a proposed budget, we go off longstanding practice, but if
Yeah.
the board would like to increase that line, we could increase that line and reduce the ending balance.
well, I think originally what the whole purpose of it was, that was actually $5,000, and that was before we had, and commissioners were making significant contributions to the area of liaison. Then when that didn't happen, because it was already covered in each budget,
Mhm.
then that $1,500 was supposed to go to, so in other words, let's say there was a community funding proposal, each commissioner had perhaps in their liaison area that they
Mhm.
wanted to fund.
Mhm.
So then that's why I never spent it
Mhm.
all year, because I thought there was going to be one particular project I was going to be devoting it to. So anyhow, it's there,
Mhm.
and don't try to steal it from me.
I won't.
Anyway.
It's in the
so
balance,
It's in the balance. Okay.
so. So any other questions on 1013? Okay, let's see. The next page, we're gonna jump further down into the book. So you're gonna skip over facilities and IT and look for the tab administrative services. It's yellow. Okay, I wouldn't even be close. All right, is everybody there on 1010? Okay, Justin, go ahead.
So this budget accounts for the finance department, admin staff such as Ken and myself, and the majority of human resources. And you'll notice that this is a place that we're cutting a bit into beginning balance, as revenue hasn't always kept up quite with our expenses. And then I'll just go on to FTE here, personnel. And you'll recall that Ken mentioned that a portion of his FTE is now taken out of 1013. So you'll see instead of the one FTE there next to county administrator, it's now 0.8. And then the title of my position actually changed as well. So it's going back to deputy county administrator. So you'll notice,
Can we congratulate you?
sure, not
Congratulations.
really too much has changed. I mean, Ken did a little modification, I suppose, to the org chart. But yeah, business services director, it's zeroed out now. And so I'm accounted for in 1010 401.54 there. So really, that's all the changes in personnel. Just move on to materials and services. Really not a huge difference here when you look at the bottom line. It's actually slightly less than the year prior, looking at the overall budget. It's really in the ballpark, just maybe 13,000 less. So nothing really to report there. Any questions on 1010?
And I would just add, this is one of the funds that, of course, we watch really closely because it's not that we're without need in admin in 1010, because it's not fully reflected because a portion of human resources is also in Fund 80. But this is something that we've been, we've had this discussion in previous fiscal years during budget adoption that our staffing for our human resources hasn't kept pace with the growth in FTEs in the county. And then I would also point to that Mike's shop is, the finance department is also in here. And that's another one that a very, very streamlined, very busy office.
Sorry, the volume just changed and it was strange to me.
I know, it
Okay.
keeps doing that. It just doesn't, it's somebody sending me a message, stop talking. So, so, so this is one of those funds that we watch and we work with very carefully, and central admin has run very lean and efficient in trying to accomplish, and it's been a very, very, especially during the pandemic, HR in particular was presented with a lot of challenges. As you can imagine, like everyone else was probably experiencing employment challenges during a pandemic. And so
It was a little bit extra for HR though.
a little extra,
Mhm.
yeah. And we had some turnover with our HR position, but I'm really pleased and I look forward to when the committee gets a chance to meet Patricia on Wednesday when she does the presentation to the compensation committee. We do have an outstanding new HR director who has really hit the ground running. I have to keep reminding myself she just started in December and it feels like she's been here 5 years already. But she's doing a great job. But yeah, I'll stop rambling. This fund has not been without its challenges. We still have specific needs, but we also recognize that we're trying to be deliberate in our plans and how we roll this out. And we're making it work at this point.
Chair, just a quick question. So the beginning balance, that's a significant drop.
Mhm.
How do we rectify that?
Well,
We
we
did
had some-
charge a bit more in admin overhead to try to better capture the true cost for serving the various departments. Doesn't quite make up for everything, but that's one thing we've tried to do.
Yeah, the admin charges in particular is one, that's a good point, is we've had to revisit the methodology, what historically we've done, because previous admin charges were based on actual expenditures. And the problem is if you add a new position or you add FTEs, that's not captured in the admin fees because it's based on actual costs, not new budgeted costs. And so sometimes we end up digging ourselves into a hole. So it's something that we've been working on, of revisiting that formula. Again, those are for the non-general fund departments. Okay, that's weird.
It is weird.
Sorry, but I can hear when the microphone cuts out. So
It's operator error.
no, I think there's a time limit. It's like telling me to stop.
And the year to date, I mean, you must have, I would imagine that at least Mike has a pretty clear sense of a proposed or estimated beginning fund balance of 48,000 versus the year-to-date total of 155. Right, that there's probably some significant expenses between now and beginning of fiscal year, right?
Well, and the one important thing is when you're looking at the year-to-date, which again, that's 21, 22, the current fiscal year. We did have some vacancies, including our HR manager position was vacant leading into this budget year.
Right.
And we have some cost savings going in. And what you see for the 48,000, that's our projected end of year balance for this year. So it gets kind of confusing when you go back and forth between the two. Go ahead, Mike. You want to say something?
No, when we built the budget, of course, I've had 4 vacancies since the
Mhm.
budget's been built,
Hmm.
I think.
And we
Three
added
maybe.
an HR manager in there. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where some of the challenges comes in when we're building these budgets in January. And then all of a sudden, we built this budget. We think this number is actually going to be higher because like Mike was sharing, he has 2 vacancies within his division that has happened after this budget was built. So there will be some vacancy savings that will go in. So there's a lot of moving pieces when we're trying to project our beginning balances each year, because we're trying to project 6 months of expenditures. And most of the time we try to make sure, because we also want to be very careful that we don't underestimate and say, well, we're going to shut down spending come January 1 in order to build a beginning balance, and then, which isn't realistic, because we're still going to have 6 months worth of expenditures that may need to happen. So it's projecting beginning balances is in a lot of challenges at times. But that being said, we are never cut out again because I'm talking too long.
You get 3 minutes.
So we are seeing that the beginning balance is, it's something we're going to have to continue to watch and monitor. So. Okay. Any questions on 1010? Okay, on page 92, normally I don't get into Fund 40 except for when we talk about Fund 40, but this one's a little bit unique. This is 4161. So it should be immediately behind the 1010 budget that I went over. Is everyone finding it?
Yes.
Sorry, this one, the
It's just
numbers,
not
it's out, this one's out of order.
in numeric. It's not in numeric.
So go to page 119, and this is technically, it's called 92, but it would be page 120.
It would be page 120.
It makes perfect sense.
It's immediately before the internal services tab. That's another way to think about it.
Correct. Yeah, right before, that's a good one. That's an easy way to find it.
I did.
Mhm.
All right, so 4161. So this fund is in Fund 40, which is capital reserve. And what we use this fund for, this is for capital grants that may come up during the fiscal year. So what you're going to see in this budget is you're going to see a pretty substantial beginning balance.
And then it looks like you're proposing something.
Right. So that, I'm sorry, I do so many of these budgets, so I freeze up on occasion. So that 2.8 million, the reason that number is so high is because it reflects the 2.3 million that we received from DOS from the state of Oregon for rural broadband projects. So that's why that's coming forward in the beginning balance. We've already received the funds this current fiscal year. In fact, if you look at, you'll see the 2,290,000. No, that's the wrong number. Where is it? Oh, it hasn't been booked yet because we received it after this report had been run. So that's what the 2.8 million is reflecting, and it includes that 2.3 million plus some other unspent revenues within this budget. The other state grants, the 150,000, that is simply a placeholder for potential grants. This is one that sometimes emergency management in particular will write for grants, and we keep this as a placeholder. And then when you get down into the actual expenses, the only line item that I would call out is 720.90. Also included in that amount of the beginning balance is last year, last fiscal year, the Board of Commissioners, we did transfer of funds into this account for repaying the Connect Oregon 6 grant. And so those funds are in here for the repayment of MUDOT for the MLS West Side of Trail Bridge. So those funds are included in here, and if you get down to the 720.90, that's the repayment that's been budgeted to occur next fiscal year on those repayments. And we'll continue to make those payments. I just need to make sure it's appropriate. And then when you get down to 811.02, you see the 2.3 million. Again, that's the rural broadband funds that we have. So hopefully, right now we have an RFP that's open to hire a consultant under our ARPA funds to put together a plan and a grant program. So hopefully we can identify some rural broadband expansion projects that we would use these funds to fund. Any questions on 4161?
What were you saying wasn't included in the top? The rural broadband or?
The beginning balance and the 2.8 million up above.
Uh-huh.
Because this is something we don't have revenues coming in at all.
Okay.
So it's just that 2.8 million plus $150,000 placeholder. And then you can see where the expenses are broken out down below.
Okay.
150,000, that's the other end of the placeholder because we have to balance the budget. The $458,000 that we have available for Connect Oregon, and then the 2.3 million down below.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions? Any other? Okay. And we already did 1039. We'll say Fund 80 for, we're not supposed to do Fund 80 today, are we? I guess we can see. Well, why don't we? I know this is, oh, you gave me that look, Justin. I know this is our favorite fund. Let's see, on page, well, the page number is 125, but there's also a tab. I don't know what color it is.
It's a purple tab. I
It
mean,
looks blue.
I see it as purple.
Okay,
Purple.
it's called Insurance Reserve.
My handouts for the reclass are in my office.
That's all right. We can bring it
Okay.
later. I'll mention it and we'll put it in the file. Okay, 8038. So, so this is a pretty big fund. Fund 80 is our insurance reserve, and there's a lot of insurance and risk pool information that's built into this. 8038 is what we call the administrative portion of Fund 80. So what you're going to see in 8038 is we have a risk manager, our risk management position. We have a portion of our HR director and a portion of Justin's position are all built into this because it's their responsibility. Justin does all the insurance renewals, and then with most of this insurance and risk reserve, that's a primary responsibility of our HR division. So those are the positions that are in there. The one thing that Justin was mentioned, we do have a reclassification request that we're going to be, there's supposed to be a memo in here. We will add it,
Yeah.
but it'll be on the agenda for Wednesday because we're looking at our risk manager is reclassifying that risk manager from a management analyst to a senior management analyst. This is somebody who, both for redundancies and backup for our HR director when they're out, but then this was also a person who performed the functions of the HR director while that position was vacant for almost a year. It took us a while to fill that position and in the middle of the pandemic. And so in recognition of the hard work that she put in during that time, and then I'll also make sure that we have redundancies in place and we're not having to navigate things, we need to move her to a senior. And I'll let Justin, we'll make sure we get the memorandum handed out and add into the packet.
Yeah, especially with the pandemic. I mean, that really ramped up the workload for her, and it hasn't slowed down since.
Just a whole bunch.
With
Yeah.
managing leaves and all sorts of things. I think for a period of time, she was the only HR employee still in the office.
And she still comes to work.
Yes, impressive.
So she's done an outstanding job. So turning the page to 126, 80-88 is our dental self-insurance plan. And this is for most of the employees who are not Teamsters. This is everyone outside of Teamsters. We're self-insured for our dental plan. We pay for administration, but we're self-insured for dental. So we pay for all the claims that come through it. And it's worked really well for us over the years. So we work with our broker. We make sure we have sufficient funds available to cover all claims that may be incurred during the year. And then we pay an admin fee and we pay those dental claims. 8092 is contingency. And you're going to see that we've made some pretty significant changes. We doubled what we are now booking for contingency. We are in the process of working on insurance renewals, and we're anticipating that CIS is going to come and ask for higher deductibles per claims, and we need to make sure that we budget sufficient funds that should we end up the losing end of a claim or something along those lines, that we have some increased contingency funds that we can get into to help pay for those claims. So we've taken that from 250,000 and increased it to $500,000. Fund 8094 is the beginning balance. The one thing that's unique, you'll see it like in Fund 16 or some of the other ones. Instead of doing individual beginning balances within the division, we balance this entire fund to that beginning balance. So, I mean, it's good that we have a good beginning balance, and that's been the work of being effective at managing our claims and not paying a lot of that on claims and realizing cost savings where we can. And departments have done a really good job of doing that, and that's the reason we've been able to build that up. Hopefully we'll continue to build that up, because right now with our liability, and I can get into more detail on that, we're on what's called our retro plan. So we haven't had any claims, so we've realized some cost savings each year because we're only paying 60% of our liability premium. But if we were to have to start paying claims, then we're responsible for up to 120% of that claim. And that's $500,000 before we reach that out-of-pocket maximum. So again, insurance reserve is critical because we want to make sure we have sufficient funds available that should we get hit with the claim. And also it's just, people are more litigious these days, whether it's personnel, whether it's claims, whether it's jail-related claims, whether it's, you name it, people are just more litigious, and we need to make sure that we have a healthy insurance reserve to make sure that we can manage those claims as they come up, and it doesn't put us in a precarious place that we're having to make a decision between services and paying claims. So also included in Fund 80, the other important thing that I'd like to highlight is we also have funds being appropriated to make sure that we're engaged in active risk management. That 8038, that's the whole intent, is to make sure that we have an outstanding HR team, that we're making investments for trainings, consultants, hazard assessments, ergonomics, all of those things are all built into version 80. So hopefully we can manage those claims and help improve and maintain a positive experience for them, to then also help the county save money and have less exposure with our insurance reserve. All right. Let's see, 8133, which is on page 127. This is our PEL reserve. What you see here, the number is we booked a liability. This is a liability we have. It's one of our leave programs for personal extended leave. And so Mike does the calculation for us. We need to make sure there's only two ways that employees can access their personal extended leave if they have any on the books. There's one at retirement. The second part is for any extended medical absence in excess of 5 days. So this is an additional leave that we book the liability to make sure that we have that. So if somebody has a retirement in a division with somebody who had a high PEL, we can transfer funds so to cover the expense to that department. So again, it's just a liability, we have to book it. 8134 is our property insurance or property damage account. And you can see that all the county internal property insurance, the 240,964. That's part of the formula that we charge out to various departments. We collect those funds and we make sure that we're able to pay not only our premiums, our annual premiums for our property insurance, but to also ensure that we have some funds set aside so we can handle, a lot of times we'll take small claims. Like if we have something that's small, we'll just pay for it directly out of this instead of having it impact our experience. And also we have a $5,000 deductible anyways, so we try to help the departments in covering that $5,000 deductible. So we use this fund historically if we get a claim, if, for example, a $10,000 claim, instead of having it reflect on our experience, we may just pay that $10,000 claim directly out of this fund instead of having it be processed by our insurance. And it's just a way to keep our experience on the positive side. Any questions on property? Retirement reserve, 8135. Again, this was one that I mentioned earlier in my presentation that we set aside funds in a PERS retirement reserve. So we haven't been transferring in additional funds, but you'll see the interfund loan, the 47,000. We do have funds coming out of that are repaying for a previous loan that came out of these funds. Otherwise, we're looking at having a reserve for the future of $2.3 million that should in the future. I'm not saying that we necessarily want to use those funds this year. I haven't seen the need for it, but in future years, we continue to see escalating costs with PERS or personnel costs. These are funds available that could be transferred out to the departments to offset those costs. But again, that would be a one-time Band-Aid and a one-time transfer. And once we spend that or do that transfer, it's not like it's going to get replenished anytime soon. So again, it's to make sure we have sufficient funds available to make sure the county is in solid footing. Any questions on 8135? 8136 time loss reserve. This is related to workers' comp. We charge a percentage to departments, a very small, slight 0.1% on salary is charged that goes into this fund. This is part of our workers' comp. It's workers' comp related. So if a department has somebody who's out for an extended period on a workers' comp claim, these funds are available to help backfill or hire somebody that may be able to come in on a temporary basis to provide coverage while that person's out. We haven't had a lot of utilization of this, but we do have the funds available if needed. Typically, one, we've been fortunate. We haven't, I'm going to knock on some wood, that we haven't had a lot of extended absences related with workers' comp claims. So we haven't had to utilize this very much, but because most of the absences have been limited in nature. And so most departments will come back and say, well, it doesn't make any sense to use these funds and hire somebody for 3 weeks and kind of go through that. They'll take the whole time to train them. So, but it is available if it's ever needed. And that's why we continue to ensure that we have those funds coming into funding. 8137 is our workers' comp reserve. Again, this is one that we've been really happy about our switch to SAFE because we've seen some significant cost savings. And it's going well. The 502 or 506,000, that's based on budgeted salary. Again, this is a budget placeholder. We actually charge the actual, there's a formula and a workers' comp rate that's charged to every single department. We make sure we collect that, gives us sufficient funds to not only pay for our annual insurance, which you'll see down below is 610.08, which is our workers' comp insurance, but we're also able to budget additional funds, the 25,000 for workers' comp, non-disabling claims. Those are for smaller claims that if we pay safe to cover those, it doesn't count against us in our experience rating. So we'll do that every single year. So again, we're looking for ways that we can save money and help our experience. We also have some professional services and some department equipment that's supposed to help with return to work. If we have situations or if we need to make ergonomic improvements for anybody who may have a workplace injury. Again, this is an insurance fund. We're looking for the worst case scenario. So we have those funds that are built in here. Any questions on workers' comp? Okay. 8138 liability reserve. So again, when you look at the revenues, we have both beginning balance for the entire fund, and then we have the 850,000 that we charge to departments to bring funds in to cover claims, our premiums, our broker fees, etc. You get down into, we have 6101 professional services. We've increased that number a little bit because we are seeing engaging with outside legal counsel, investigations, a lot of things like that, especially with personnel things. We want to make sure we have sufficient resources to cover that. Again, we're a large organization. We work in several areas that are high in liability. Whether it's public works or the jail, or there's just a lot of things that go wrong. So it's just making sure that we have sufficient resources. And like I said, people seem to be a lot more litigious these days. So we have those funds. We made that increase. 61007 as the liability insurance. We have $724,000 budgeted there. That is something that we're keeping an eye on. The insurance industry has been feeling the effects of COVID and the pandemic, and I think with litigation and everything associated with that, we're seeing increases, but we're still in the process of renewals, so we don't know what the real number is going to look like. So this number is a educated guess on our part, working with our broker who's looked at forecasts and told us what to look at as far as renewals go. 610.14, you're going to see that we made some changes to that. We have 1.3 million being budgeted. Again, that's to make sure that we have sufficient funds available. Because also keeping in mind that something that in working with our broker, I realized something we needed to fix within this fund is historically we would fund like I mentioned before, that we had a retro plan. So we pay 60% of the premium, we're responsible for 120%. And so that's how we've been budgeting the prior years. But then we realized that we need to fix this because now we've been on this retro plan for multiple years. So let's say that we have and it takes sometimes 2-3 years to litigate something. The potential issue that we had is we could have a fiscal year where we could have 2 litigation cases that, let's just say worst case scenario, that we're responsible for $500,000 for each case because they occurred in different plan years, but they all came due in the same fiscal year. So we modified this, and we want to make sure that we have sufficient appropriation authority, that we're not, again, having to go into other funds or go into other streams of operational funds to cover potential claims. Now, I'm not saying we're going to experience having to pay off 3 claims in the next year, but again, this is our insurance reserve we're trying to book for the worst case scenario. And that's what we've done here, and that's why you're going to see such a large increase in that number. Did I miss anything, or do
No.
you have anything to add?
No.
I'm starting
Yeah.
to sound more and more like an insurance salesman.
Well, yeah, our broker was telling us, our provider was, they're getting information from them, telling them it's probably going to go up 15 to 20%. So that's what we were looking at.
Right.
That's why you see such a significant increase in, what we're anticipating.
Right.
As far as our premiums concerned. So very, very hard market right now.
Yep. So on page 129, the next one is medical insurance. This is something that we closed out last year, and we'll see it for one more year, and then we won't see it again. So there's nothing budgeted there because we closed that out. Okay, page 130. I'm sorry, I should pause for a minute. Does anybody have any questions on Fund 80? Okay. That was a bit more. So that. Yeah. All right, 1002 discretionary revenues, which is on page 130. This was the one during my presentation I talked about. This is where our property taxes are coming in, as well as all the lesser taxes. And you're also going to see that transfer in from solid waste and from ARPA that it's coming into this fund. So we have a total revenue of $36,639,222 that's coming in. All but 2.8 million of that has been distributed. It's on that spreadsheet that I shared, that all of the 2.8 million has been allocated out to the various departments. So this is going to be one that really the 2.6 million, you see we maintain $200,000 in other expense in this. And we use that for appropriation transfers or to help out departments as needed. It's kind of a secondary contingency fund. But otherwise, the 2.6 million is going to be funds available that as you're hearing requests during this week. If it's the general fund request that's approved, that's where these funds are going to come out of. So if there's a $200,000 request, the committee approves it, they approve general fund. Now the reserve for the future will be 2.4 million. And so. So any questions? I feel like we talked about this one in detail. I'm happy to answer questions, but I know I talked about it quite a bit during my budget message, and there's probably more details about it there. So, no questions.
So Ken, I do have a question, and partly because I think I'm catching just pieces of what you're saying because your mic is cutting in and out a lot. So I don't know that I understand what you were addressing with the reserve for future.
Okay, so can you hear me okay now?
That's much better. Yeah, thank you.
All right, I switched microphones. So the reserve for the future that you see there, the 2.6 million, that is what has not been allocated out to departments. We already did the exercise of the discretionary allocation. So all but 2.8 million of the 36 million that was identified as revenue is being distributed out to departments. So that 2.6 million, what I was saying is any requests that are considered tonight, that we're maybe receiving requests as part of the public hearing. And then also during the budget presentations, there's also a number of requests that are also being filtered through here for requests for general fund. So any general fund requests that are approved is going to have an impact on that 2.6 million in reserve for the future. So we would that's one of the buckets of funds that we would reduce as far as our reserves going forward, depending on what's approved.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll just keep using this microphone. Page 131. I'll let you take this one, Justin. You want to talk about transfers and contingency?
Really, there's not much to say. I mean,
Transfers.
transfers,
Transfers.
what you see is what you get.
No.
Yeah, we just have some transfers budgeted in there that really aren't anything out of the ordinary. You know, we charge the departments for rent and some of those other items. And so we use this to move those internal charges to their appropriate fund and pay for, you know, the expenses of janitorial services and maintenance and all those types of things.
And it's a budgetary function that in order for us to move monies from Fund 10 to a non-general fund department like Fund 40, which is capital reserve, Fund 16 with this health and human services, you know, those are the two main categories that really come up. And even in the past, you'll see historically we moved to the fairgrounds as well. So anybody who's a non-general fund, in order for us to move funds from Fund 10, there has to be a budgetary action, and that's what this transfer account reflects. So all of the funds in 900.04 is going to facilities maintenance, capital improvements. There was the question earlier about, and I can't remember now if I answered, about the public health funds. Let's see, now even this one's cut. It's just me. So the question about the public health funds and the capital and how we move that to Fund 40, this is the mechanism we're moving it from. It's budget, and it's in order so you can follow where the funds are going. So Fund 32 is ARPA funds. It's moved to 1002, and then 1002 via 1090, it ends up in Fund 40 where we can spend it. So you can follow the funds on how that goes. And it's more of a budgetary and it's an auditing trail as well.
Yeah.
So then you can see how the funds, we're classifying it as revenue replacement to the US Treasury. It's being moved over here, and then we want to spend it for this specific purpose in capital improvement, and that's why it's in Fund 40. I'm looking at my auditor over here.
Making good sounds.
So there's a lot of funds. Historically, they haven't been this large, but again, this is direct reflection of the ARPA funds. The one thing that, and we'll get into more detail when we talk about Fund 40, again, we're moving funds for our ERP project and for some capital improvements as well. And then 1092, the next one, that's a $250,000 contingency. We always like to have some contingency funds being made available. There's limitations on when we can actually spend those contingency funds. There are specific requirements that still requires a board of commissioners action. And if it's over a certain percentage for a department, then we also would still have to do a supplemental budget and a hearing also. So we try to keep some funds available for contingencies for something that's unforeseen during the fiscal year. Again, we're trying to forecast that we're not, worst case scenario, we're trying to keep in mind that something could happen in February of 23, and we need to make sure we have sufficient funds to cover that emergency or that needed expense. And on that, I think I got through all of the internal charges and admin. And I think I had a sketch. Any questions on any of those that I just presented?
Good job.
Well, I think that was our last budget to present today. And I was able to take care of some of them that we're not going to have to present tomorrow. So at this point, we don't have anything else on the schedule until the public hearing that opens at 5:30. That the hearing that opens at 5:30, I'm just gonna keep going back and forth when I hear it cut out.
Cut out, cut out, cut out. It's great.
So the next thing on the schedule is the hearing at 5:30, which that's a public hearing, so we'll need to make sure that we open that promptly as noticed. And otherwise, we don't have any other budgets being presented today. And so then after the public hearing tonight, we resume again tomorrow at 9 a.m. with the criminal justice team.
Sounds great.
All right, I have one question, just as I'm listening through this. You know, Health and Human Services, a lot of them have came through with the impact of COVID and the pandemic, and it has been obviously a huge impact on for 2 years.
Mhm.
And we're trending out of that.
Mhm.
Is, you know, and everybody seems to have built their budget up to take on some of that extra that's happening, that had happened in that. Is that gonna taper down? I mean, you know, like, will that actually taper down? I mean, they'll see not the need for these funds and these people and this huge happening that will go back to normal. Do you see that happening?
Well, we are looking at, just speaking budgetarily, when we look at the funds through the intergovernmental agreements, the CARES Act, the ARPAs, the direct funding like HHS has received from OHA related to I'm anticipating that as we're coming out of declared emergencies, we're not doing the same level of response. We're going to see that fewer revenues coming from state and federal resources coming in. And that when we have the limited resources, then that also looks at, well, then we don't have the resources to continue to support this position, or maybe even the workload is not what it was. So
Yeah.
that's something that Lindsay and her team are going to have to look at very closely and working with the partners. And so we should start to see that trend down. I'm not anticipating we're going to get, like I said earlier, ARPA was a one-time funding thing.
Mhm.
Now, there's other funding and grants and things that we're always kind of keeping an eye on.
Yeah.
See that one went out.
Weird.
Back to this one.
I'm happy though to point out a couple of very specific examples. So on page 2, it's 1670 331 72. So it's the federal grants. In 2021, the actual was 4.7 million. The initial budget or the proposed budget is 1.5 million.
Okay,
Um,
so it's
With a
already
total-
trending.
Total revenue in 2021 of 6.7 million and a proposed total revenue of 3.7 million.
Got it. Okay.
So definitely and I know the people who got laid off, so.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I watching
good
the
question.
FTEs and kind of balancing that with the heavy need we had for a time, so, okay. All right, well, are we done until 5:30 then?
Yep.
All right, well, let's adjourn until 5:30 tonight.
All right.
Thank you.